Question is the Harston Narrabeen. I call the honourable member for Kingsford-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Malabar Headland is the sacred green shoulder of Maroubra Beach. Beloved by our community, the headland has played host to the Anzac Rifle Range and recreational shooting activities since the 1850s. Australian troops, since the Boer War, have trained on Malabar Headland. The headland is home to the endangered eastern suburbs Banksia scrub and the site of significant Aboriginal heritage and cultural artefacts of the Bidjigal people. There are also historical World War II monuments, including the Malabar Battery, a coastal defence battery built in 1943. Madam Speaker, Malabar Headland is the last remaining tract of native bushland between Sydney Harbour and Botany Bay, and it must be preserved. It must be handed back to the people of Australia. It's an important community asset that must be protected and handed back as national park and public parklands. Madam Speaker, I, like many in our community, grew up exploring, riding bikes, playing, enjoying the natural beauty of Malabar Headland, and I want my children to be able to undertake that same privilege. In August 2010, Prime Minister Julia Gillard and former member for Kingsford-Smith, my predecessor Peter Garrett, announced Malabar Headland would be returned to the people as national park and public parklands. Since that time, Labor worked to ensure that that process was brought to fruition, to ensure that that plan was made a reality. Labor in government remediated the western portion of Malabar Headland at a cost of $2 million. And in March 2012, that 70-hectare segment of the headland became a national park, handed back to the people of New South Wales and protected as a national park. The eastern portion of the headland, out behind the target range next to the coastline, was remediated at a cost of $11 million and was ready to be handed back to the people as a national park. Work on a leachate drain on both the northern and southern sides of the headland was put in place to alleviate seepage from the headland, which for 2 decades, from 1968 to 1988, was a public landfill site. Labor negotiated with licence holders to vacate the land to allow remediation work to begin on the largest central portion, and we allocated funding in the budget to get on with the plan to return the headland to the people, to create a public parklands, to continue the wonderful coastal walkway around the headland to ensure that people can walk from Bondi to Botany Bay unimpeded along Sydney's beautiful coastline. But when the Abbott government was elected, the progress that Labor put in place was halted. They commissioned a secret plan for the development of Malabar Headland, a plan that was only revealed in the Sydney Morning Herald on the 22nd of January this year, after a Freedom of Information request was put in by the Herald. The report itself is heavily redacted, but some of the quotes are illuminating. And one of those is, as I quote, "The actual return is dependent on the extent of the lot which is made available for development. The upper level of estimated return is based on 48 hectares of the site being made available for development and the Commonwealth undertaking remediation of the site prior to divestment." End quote. That was the government's secret plan, commissioned earlier on in the process of this government, delivered in September 2014, interestingly, so the government sat on this plan since that time. Needless to say, Madam Speaker, the community was fiercely opposed to this, and myself and the member for Maroubra, Michael Daly, joined with community groups, including the Friends of Malabar Headland, to stand against this push for development. The Environment Minister, Greg Hunt, then declared that the government would not proceed with the development of the headland, despite the fact that they'd spent all this money on this report. But given their history on the headland, the government's words are hollow. It's time for action. The Abbott government must allocate money in the budget to continue remediation, to continue Labor's work and its plan to return the headland to the people. In the meantime, the Friends of Malabar Headland should be allowed back onto the eastern portion of the headland to continue their bush regeneration work with the eastern suburbs Banksia scrub. I, myself, Michael Daly and members of our community will work towards ensuring that this headland is protected from development and returned to the people as
The honourable
parklands.
member's time has expired. I call the honourable member for Macmillan.
Speaker, tonight I'd like to speak